Jelly Roll, born Jason DeFord, didn't grow up in the kind of place where people make it out alive, let alone famous. Antioch, Tennessee was home, but it wasn't a safe haven. It was a neighborhood riddled with poverty, addiction, and violence. By the time most kids his age were worrying about middle school crushes or trying to get their learner's permit, Jelly Roll was already knee-deep in a lifestyle that was leading nowhere fast. His childhood wasn't just rough, it was fractured. The streets weren't just outside his door, they were his home. Hustling for survival became second nature. He was raised around crack pipes, broken furniture, and broken people. There wasn't a lot of room for innocence where he came from. At just 14 years old, he was first arrested. Not for some petty teenage stunt, but for real, serious crimes. Armed robbery, possession, gang activity. And it wasn't a one-time thing. In and out of juvenile detention became the norm, and eventually, adult prison came calling. By the time he was barely old enough to drive, Jelly Roll was already serving time in a cold, hard cell, facing the kind of reality that strips away your youth in a matter of months. Prison wasn't a phase, it was survival mode. Violence, fear, and uncertainty were everyday occurrences. He didn't just serve time, he endured it. Fistfights, lockdowns, and the constant threat of being stabbed or worse. In that environment, weakness wasn't an option. Trust didn't exist. He learned to keep his head down, move carefully, and rely on no one but himself. But prison wasn't the real punishment. What haunted Jelly Roll more than anything was what he was missing on the outside. Life was moving forward without him. Friends were growing up. Opportunities were passing him by. He knew the world wasn't waiting. And deep down, even though he wore a tough exterior, the fear that he'd be forgotten, that he was wasting his life, was beginning to grow louder. He started writing rhymes on scraps of paper. It was therapy. It was a way to survive. But more than that, it was a whisper of a dream. Maybe, just maybe, music could be his way out. But the bars on the cell weren't the only thing holding him back. The past, the pain, and the chaos had already taken deep root. And what came next would make it even harder to climb out. But that wasn't the whole story. The most heartbreaking chapter of Jelly Roll's early life didn't happen in the streets or the prison yard. It happened in a hospital room he wasn't allowed to see. While locked behind bars, Jelly Roll became a father. But instead of holding his newborn daughter in his arms, he held nothing but regret and shame. His daughter was born while he was still serving time, and the guilt of missing her birth would haunt him for years. He was just a teenager, a kid himself, trying to come to terms with the fact that he had a child depending on him, when he couldn't even take care of himself. The reality hit hard. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about responsibility. But how could he be a father from inside a cage? He wrote letters. He begged for photos. He tried to stay connected in any way he could. But every day that passed without seeing her, every birthday he missed, every milestone that slipped by without him, it all added up to a crushing weight that nearly broke him. That baby girl wasn't just his daughter. She was his reminder that he needed to change. That if he ever wanted to be more than a statistic, he had to fight harder than ever before. It would take years for him to rebuild that bond. But the seed had been planted. Music became more than a dream, it became a mission. He wasn't just trying to escape his past anymore. He was trying to create a future for himself and for the daughter he barely knew. But stepping out of prison didn't mean stepping into a better life. In fact, things were about to get even darker. Jelly Roll didn't just walk away from the prison system and become a star. Far from it. The years that followed his release were some of the most chaotic of his life. Freedom didn't come with direction. It came with temptation. And for a man raised in chaos, the streets welcomed him back like an old friend. Addiction crept in like smoke, slow, silent, and suffocating. Pills, weed, lean, anything that could numb the pain, quiet the regret, or just get him through another night. He wasn't just partying, he was self-medicating. And like so many others who come from trauma and broken homes, the drugs were less about fun and more about escape. He was trying to build a rap career, pushing mixtapes out of his trunk, doing local shows. But every step forward came with step back. He'd be high one night and hustling the next. Studio sessions would turn into all-night binges. And slowly, people started writing him off as another cautionary tale, another guy with potential who just couldn't stay clean. The darkest part? He didn't care. At least, that's what he told himself. But deep down, he knew he was slipping. The music was his lifeline, but the addiction was dragging him under. And there were moments when he genuinely didn't think he'd make it, until something happened that shocked even him. Jelly Roll never imagined that his first taste of fame would come while still battling addiction and living out of trap houses. But that's exactly what happened. One day, he uploaded a freestyle to YouTube, a raw, unfiltered, emotional rap that poured out every bit of pain he'd ever felt. No producers, no label, just him, a beat, and the truth. And the internet exploded. Millions of views, thousands of comments, fans from around the world connecting with the raw honesty in his lyrics. For the first time, people weren't just listening, they were relating. They saw the pain in his eyes, the truth in his voice. Jelly Roll wasn't a polished star. He was real, and people were desperate for something real. But even as his videos blew up, he was still living in chaos. There were nights when he'd sleep on a friend's couch, or not at all. He'd shoot a video in the afternoon and crash from a binge that night. It was a double life. Viral sensation on YouTube and drug-riddled survivor in reality. Still, something was changing. Doors were opening, shows were getting booked, collabs were coming in. The music was finally becoming more than a dream. It was becoming a way out. But that didn't mean the darkness was gone. In fact, the more success he found, the more he had to confront the demons he'd spent his whole life avoiding. As Jelly Roll's fame grew, so did the distance between him and the people he once called family. His childhood friends, those who had survived alongside him in the streets, began to disappear. Some ended up behind bars. Others didn't make it at all. Every phone call he didn't want to answer, every funeral he dreaded attending. Every name he heard in passing that triggered memories of a time when things were raw, real, and dangerous. And while fans celebrated his honesty and rise to stardom, they didn't see the price he paid behind the scenes. Every song he performed reopened a wound. Every interview brought up the ghosts of a life he couldn't fully escape. He wasn't just rapping about pain, he was still living it. Guilt haunted him. Survivor's guilt. Fame, guilt. Even success didn't taste sweet when the people who once dreamed with him weren't around to share it. Still, he kept moving, touring, writing, smiling for cameras. But deep down, the weight was crushing him, until one person changed everything. Enter Bunny XO, not just a partner but a pivotal force in Jelly Roll's life. She wasn't drawn to his fame. She saw the man beneath the lyrics, the man who still carried the weight of every mistake he ever made. While the world was just beginning to understand Jelly Roll's music, Bunny was already tuned into his soul. She recognized the pain behind his smile, the scars behind his tattoos, and she never flinched. She didn't try to fix him, because she knew he wasn't broken, just bruised. Bunny brought calm to the chaos, where Jelly Roll once saw only a stormy future. She helped him imagine something softer, something safe. She became his mirror and his anchor, reminding him of who he could be without ever shaming him for who he had been. Their love was not without challenges. There were fiery arguments, days clouded by doubt, and nights spent wondering if love alone could hold them together. But what made it real was the choice they kept making, to show up, to stay, to fight for each other. She encouraged therapy, not as a fix, but as a lifeline. She reminded him of his responsibilities, especially to his daughter, and helped him balance the tightrope between redemption and relapse. Jelly Roll himself admitted that if it weren't for Bunny, he might have spiraled all over again. In a life marked by instability, she gave him something he never thought he'd have: emotional safety. Together, they built not just a relationship, but a sanctuary. One where pain could be spoken, not buried. Where healing wasn't just possible, it was prioritized. For the first time in his life, Jelly Roll wasn't running from something. He was running towards someone. And in Bunny's love, He found a version of himself he didn't know existed, a man worthy of peace. If someone had told 16-year-old Jason DeFord, locked in a juvenile cell and dreaming of survival, that he would one day be standing on stage at the Grand Ole Opry, he would have laughed. Not out of disbelief, but because it seemed so absurdly out of reach. Music wasn't a career. It was an escape. Something he scribbled in notebooks between court dates and probation hearings. Yet, somehow, that same raw, unfiltered pain he poured into verses would become his salvation. Jelly Roll didn't come up through talent agencies or major label grooming. He came from backroom studio setups, late-night battles, and songs recorded in the haze of cigarette smoke and trauma. His early mixtapes weren't about fame, they were about survival. Every track was a diary entry, every lyric was a confession. And listeners didn't just hear him, they felt him. As he evolved from underground rap to country rock fusion, critics were confused. But fans? Fans were obsessed. Jelly Roll's authenticity was magnetic. He was real in a way the industry had forgotten how to be. He didn't sanitize his past. He put it on display: drugs, prison, addiction, recovery. He showed the ugly alongside the beautiful, and people respected that. When Save Me dropped, something shifted. That song wasn't just a hit, it was a lifeline for thousands dealing with their own demons. Fans flooded his inbox with stories about how his music helped them through loss, addiction, grief, and self-destruction. Jelly Roll didn't just have an audience, he had a community. Soon, the boy who used to hustle for studio time was headlining sold-out arenas. The man who once watched award shows from a jail bunk was now accepting trophies, but he never lost his grounding. Even when the money came, the industry embraced him, and his name was trending, he kept showing up as the same vulnerable, open-hearted artist who once doubted he'd live to see adulthood. And maybe that's the greatest twist of his story. He didn't clean up to succeed. He succeeded because he stayed real. Jelly Roll's story isn't one of clean-cut transformation or Hollywood endings. It's messy, real, ongoing. It's the story of a man who was born into chaos and found his way to peace, not by ignoring the pain, but by embracing it. By turning scars into lyrics, hurt into healing, from jail cells to the Grand Ole Opry, from dope houses to award shows, from hopelessness to purpose. He's not just a musician, he's a mirror, reflecting the brokenness we all carry, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, we're not too far gone. Because if Jelly Roll can rise, who's to say anyone can't?